this is Dancing Rabbit, and welcome to another late edition of Wiccan Pagan Perspective. Two quick apologies, and I know they say you should never apologize at the beginning of a speech, or I guess a video. First, I apologize for the lateness of this. I had lots of stuff going on, both at work and around the house, and also that this is one of these talking head videos rather than an actual doing video. But there just wasn't enough time to get all the stuff together and properly do a demo video. So let's get right to the question from Our Churchman 2. I was wondering if you could show us your personal altars just out of my own curiosity. Being a teen in a conservative Christian household, I have to be not only resourceful but able to hide everything. I want to know what your altars looked like when you were younger, what they look like now. Thanks. Well, I've used a clip, a video of Feather and my, I guess, personal or family altar at the opening, so now you know what our altar looks like now. Feather is mainly in charge of this altar. It's a rectangular affair about a foot front to back and almost 3 feet long. And it's about waist high off the floor. So she updates it, rearranges it on a really regular basis depending on the upcoming Sabbath. She's fixed it for full moons a few times. Basically, our two patron deities, mine Kronos and hers Hecate, stay at either end of the altar most of the time, but the altar cloth and the other stuff, you know, it really varies from Sabbath to Sabbath, and even in between. If she's doing a particular work of magic, or I am, then that stuff finds its way onto the altar. We have two outside altars, and it's too dark right now for me to show them. One of them is a natural rock altar. It's only a few inches off the ground, that I built for Feather several years ago, and she uses it primarily for devotions and I guess you could call it offerings, to put things on an altar, offering them to the gods. We have an altar that we use for group meetings when our Cups chapter meets over here, and it's basically a round table. It's about 2.5 feet in diameter, kind of a folding table, and it serves as the altar when we do group rituals. I think you really need to consider what it is, not only, you know, what is an altar, but what are you going to do with it? Why do you want to set up an altar? What sort of an altar are you talking about? Now, I began about 20-something years ago as basically a book-taught pagan. I didn't have any group to work with. Feather and I lived in a small town, and though we eventually connected with other local pagans and formed a small group, they were all basically as book-taught as we were. So the impression I had of a Wiccan-based pagan altar was a small round table. You covered it with a cloth, and you put representations of the 4 elements at the corner. You had quarter candles, small votive candles, of the official colors of the quarters, and you put your tools, your athame, your wand, your bowl of water, and your pentacle with salt at the corners of the table. You put a god and a goddess candle in the middle. That this was something that you set up for a ritual. So that's how I began, and that's basically what my altar would have looked like if you'd seen it 20 years ago. Very much like some of the sketches out of some of the very early Wiccan-based books. And the impression I had at the time is that an altar was something temporary. Just like the cast circle. It's our temple, but it's something that you set up for a purpose, and then when it's over, after you're done, you take it all down and you put it away. Now, I wasn't doing this because I needed to hide it from somebody, but it was just the impression I got from the books that I'd read that this is what you did. And of course, when we would have a ritual over at someone else's house, we did this in the largest room in the house, the living room. When we had it at our house back in Arkansas, it was in the living room, in the middle of the floor, that we set up the altar. And since we didn't plan to turn the house into kind of a permanent pagan church, as soon as ritual was over, we took it back down. Same thing if we did outdoor rituals at a park or down by the lake. We didn't build something that was going to just be there. We set it up, we took it down. Now, since then, I guess probably the last 3 or 4 years, we have shifted to more of a permanent shrine, and I think that's what I would call the altar, that our present altar that was in the intro. This is an altar that's up all the time, and it changes with the seasons and with what we're doing, but it's not a put it up and take it down kind of thing. Now, there are altars that are dedicated to specific deities where you might do devotions, prayers, chants, invocations involving that particular deity. There are other altars that I would call, and I'm borrowing this from brujeria and hoodoo, I would call them working altars. They're altars where you're going to do works of magic. And if you're fortunate enough to be able to put one up and leave it up, most of the brujos and brujas, most of the conjure folks do this. But I think part of the way that they can get away with this is that coming from a Catholic tradition rather than Protestantism, as I did, that it's more acceptable to have a home altar with candles and images and offerings and things on it, and just have it up in the living room or one of the other rooms of the house. Now, you said that you're a teen and from a very conservative Christian household. In my book, The Way of the Horned God, I make the assumption that the people reading it will be teenage boys, and that probably they will not be from a pagan house, because most homes are not pagan. Most folks or grown-ups are not pagan. And perhaps they might be from a rather strict fundamentalist Christian home. My suggestion, assuming you can't go out and buy a copy of the book, my suggestion to you is to not hide things secretly, to hide them out in plain view, to be open but not obvious. That your altar can be a table, an end table, it can be your desk in your room, it can be a table that you use for other mundane purposes. Or you could construct a wooden box, and this could be both a storage box for things and become your altar. I wouldn't suggest that you come up with some kind of pagan safe, strong box that you put all of your pagan stuff in and put a big lock on. This is pretty obvious, and your parents might be curious as to what's in it and either ask you to open it or actually, break into it, because they're concerned about what might be in there. They love you. They're concerned about you. And it may be very inconvenient for you to practice your religion, but I think really that's their basic motivation. And, you can disagree with the way they're going about things, but, they're your parents. I would suggest that if you're going to do the altar thing, to do rituals, you clean up your bedroom, you do a purification ritual of some sort in your bedroom. Sprinkling salted water is a good symbolic way to cleanse if you can't, light a smudge stick. The altar probably would be temporary. You spread a bandana or a cloth on the table or your desk. I've made suggestions for very mundane looking altar tools if you want to use an official set of Wiccan type altar tools. Go to the hardware store or craft store, buy a dowel, cut it to 30 inches, rub some nice smelling oil on it to anoint it. That's your wand. Go down to the local dollar store and buy a table knife. You know, it's a butter knife, knife that you'd use on the table, but it's not particularly sharp. If you want to, paint the handle black. Get a little pencil holder, or recycle a soup can, and put some pencils, put your dowel, put your table knife in that, put it on your desk. I mean, it's a letter opener, it's a pointing stick. It'll sit on your desk forever and nobody will know what it is or care. As far as your chalice, you might get a small cup. I suggest the little Chinese teacups. They don't have handles, and a saucer. And when you're making your pentacle, take some salt, pour it in the saucer, not real deep, but sprinkle the salt, and take your finger and trace a pentacle and a circle. That's your pentacle. If somebody comes in, just bump it and it disappears. It can also sit on your desk along with your other things, and nobody's going to notice it. And if anybody does notice it and picks it up and handles it, it's not going to, put weird vibes into it. It's not going to hurt anything. Rather than using incense, I would suggest that you do a mist or spritzer bottle. Get you a cheap plastic spray bottle. Make a tea out of sage or nutmeg or cinnamon. Boil the water, put the herbs in it, let them sit. Don't boil them, but let them sit for a while till it gets cool. Strain it through a coffee filter, put it in your spritzer bottle. Use that instead of incense. Walgreens has some little LED, little tiny candles. They don't really flicker or anything, but use those as quarter candles if you want to do candles, and you don't want to set off the smoke alarm, or your parents said you can't light candles in your room because it's a fire hazard, and it kind of is. There's all kind of things like that you can do if you want to set up a permanent sort of shrine. Put a cloth on an end table and do a fairly artful flower arrangement. It doesn't have to be terribly elaborate. You can do two different colors, God and Goddess. You can put some pine cones, some greenery, because Yule is coming up. And, nobody needs to suspect anything. It's right out there in the open. It's not all ooky and spooky and secretive. And it is your altar. So, our churchmen, I hope that was useful. Mention my book one more time, kind of as an ad from your alternate sponsor. It is available in paperback and also in electronic form. You can get it at Amazon. I think you can also, Google Books has almost the whole thing except the last chapter up, and you can read it for free. So anyway, have a great Yule and a great New Year. I think that we have auditions coming up, and so I'll see you next year.